When the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth?
Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief.
May our testimonies be as deep and as strong as that of Jacob, who, when confronted by one who sought to destroy his faith, declared, I could not be shaken.
Now, with the battle of David versus Goliath behind us, there are many battles yet to take place, but the one that means the most is the one taking place within Saul's soul. From this moment forward, we see a death there at the end of chapter 17, the death of Goliath. It should have been Saul's counterpart. It should have been Saul slaying him. For the second half of this book, 1 Samuel, we'll go from chapter 18 to chapter 31, and it ends with another death, and it's Saul's. Because he never fully conquered the enemy of his soul. He didn't beat Goliath in 17. He didn't beat his own inner demons from this moment forward, and it spelled his own death and destruction by the end of the book. That's what we'll see from this moment forward. So verse 1, it came to pass, when he had made an end of speaking unto Saul, that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David. And Jonathan loved him as his own soul. Then Jonathan and David made a covenant because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David and his garments, even to his sword and to his bow and to his girdle. Now we're going to see more of Jonathan. I hope you fell in love with Jonathan back in chapter 14. His mad scramble up the hill to take on the Philistine garrison. But he saw in David not a competitor, but a companion. Not a foe, but a friend. And this is not a threat to my authority. I'd rather let him have the authority, and I will build him up. We are cut from the same cloth. And if God wants a heart like his to lead Israel, well, my heart is with him all the way. I love the description of all of this. Their souls were knit together. There's no seams in knitting, right? It's just, it all is interwoven. And that's what the soul to soul of these two wonderful friends. Love your neighbor as yourself. That sounds like loved him as his own soul. Where they felt good about themselves. They were confident in God and confident in themselves. So there's no, in some ways, there's nothing missing in their sense of self. So they don't need to, fill in empty holes by taking from other people. That was Saul's problem. But with Jonathan, with David, there's enough end to spare. Enough love that God has poured into me that it's pouring out into you, and I can love you just as much. To the point that Jonathan would strip himself of his robe. We've talked a bit about the prodigal son already today. And there is that older brother that was next in line and should have inherited everything and never left the father's side, and I'm the good guy, and you could kind of put a Jonathan in that place. And yet, you can definitely put a Jesus in that place. He's the elder brother of every prodigal child, and he's the one that's never left the father's side. But unlike the older brother in the parable, who is bitter that his little brother has returned, is angry that dad is taking a fatted calf out of a half that eventually will belong to him to be able to celebrate his little brother's return? No. He was dead. We were dead to him. He's still dead to me. That's not the case with Jesus. Certainly not the case with Jonathan. And you see in him, just like the father gives the prodigal son a robe, and a ring, and the fatted calf, Christ will give the robes of his righteousness. And give the ring of his authority and power. He will not just allow for the death of a fatted calf. He'll provide himself as the lamb without blemish. And I see similar things here in Jonathan, a beautiful type of Christ. Here is my robe, the regal royal ones. Here are my garments, the garments of praise, the mantle of charity. Here is my sword, my bow, my girdle. Here's my armor of God. I know you don't need it. You've got your own. at least spiritually speaking. But literally, let me help you out a little bit. I don't know if you know any Smiths. I do. And so take mine. Absolutely no jealousy on Jonathan's part, which juxtaposes him with his father, who becomes jealous and prideful to the very core. Now, we'll see this in a moment. As David returns triumphant from the battle, the women of Israel come out and they're singing and they're dancing and they're playing music. This is like the Song of Miriam after the Red Sea, the Song of Deborah after Sisera's defeat. Verse 7 and 8, the women answered one another as they played. So they're kind of singing back and forth, call and response. They say, Saul hath slain his thousands. And here's the response. And David his 10,000s. And as beautiful as these echoes of praise would sound from these female voices, Saul didn't feel that way. He was very wroth. And the saying displeased him. He hated the lyrics. And here's why. He said, wait a minute, they have ascribed unto David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed but thousands. And what can he have more but the kingdom? Remember President Benson's famous talk on pride? Where he said it doesn't care about having something, it only cares about having more than somebody else. It's all comparison and competition. That's what Saul is dealing with. He killed your thousands, it's amazing. Oh, but you're talking about tens of thousands for him. And I can't handle that. And what he says at the end there, what's left for him to take but the kingdom, that's Saul's biggest concern. It's the one thing I want to hold on to. And yes, Samuel has warned me that the kingdom's already passed to somebody else. It better not be David. I will not allow that to happen. Verse 9, Saul eyed David from that day and forward. Talk about fixating upon the object of your jealousy. And it came to pass on the morrow that the evil spirit from God, yep, there's a JST to correct it, it came upon Saul, and he prophesied in the midst of the house. Now, other translations don't say he prophesied. It says he raved like a madman, and that sounds more accurate. In other words, what spirit is moving you? Spirit of God or this evil spirit that isn't from him? Either way, David is playing with his hand, as at other times. He's trying to calm down and soothe the mad king and any chance he can. And there was a javelin in Saul's hand. Now, this is a dangerous situation. Both David and Saul have something in their hands, but David's is a harp. Saul's is a javelin. And remember, one of his motivating emotions is anger. And it's not the Spirit of God that is moving it right now. Now, if you know your emotional state, your mental state, your spiritual state, be very careful what you hold in your hand. Be very careful about what temptations you keep handy in a moment of weakness, because you may end up doing things that you never intended. This is God warning Adam and Eve, don't even touch the fruit, let alone eat it. Well, what's Saul doing with a javelin in his hand? Oh, careful, it's not going to stay there very long. Sure enough, verse 11, Saul cast the javelin, for he said, I will smite David even to the wall with it. And David avoided out of his presence twice. Now, I'm not going to do it for you, but try to keep track of how many attempts Saul makes on David's life. Here we see 1 and 2 in quick succession. And at some point, I lose track after about 12, okay, from this point forward. But notice this detail. Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with him and was departed from Saul. Saul afraid of David? If anything, David has every reason to fear Saul, although that's only physical. And it looks like young David's got some quick reflexes. That's good, saved his life. But Saul fearing David because he sees in David what he once had himself, namely the power and Spirit of God. Oh, it's interesting even to see, we'll see more of this when Joseph Smith talks about all the persecution he suffered through life. And he said, it seems that I was prone to the envy and wrath of man. The envy? They're jealous of me. They're angry at me. Is it they fear me just because I'm trying to live a righteous life and have the Spirit of God? There's something else here about self-deception. There's some great material in Bonds That Make Us Free, for example, some work from the Arbinger Institute, which is this great LDS think tank that tries to work on conflict resolution. And they often talk about in times of self-deception, we end up attacking and we end up blaming the person we want to attack. That's kind of how they say it. Where we make the person that we are offending, we make them guilty in our own minds, and that is what makes us feel justified in attacking them. That seems to be what Saul is doing. Oh, I have things to fear in him. No, you don't. You have nothing to fear in David. David has everything to fear in you. And yet if I can paint him as the monster, make him appear to be the enemy, then I'm justified in attacking him, even though it makes no sense in terms of real logic. This is the perpetrator blaming the victim, and we'll see Saul do a lot of that. Meanwhile, verse 14, David behaved himself wisely in all his ways, and the Lord was with him. Well, of course you'll be wise if God, the source of all wisdom, is with you. Wherefore, when Saul saw that he behaved himself very wisely, he was afraid of him. There it is happening again. But all Israel and Judah loved David because he went out and came in before them. David seems to be a man of God and a man of the people. And Joseph Smith was the same, just really good with keeping both great commandments. And David's out among them. He doesn't feel like he's better than them or higher than them or needs to be distinct from them. It's just, can you believe what God is doing for all of us? Saul then offers David his daughter, Merab, as a wife. I mean, okay, so Saul, is he turning things around? Well, or is this a chance of keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Because here's what he does. He says in verse 17, you can have my daughter if you will fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said to himself, well, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. See, there's no way. I mean, I guess the guy got lucky from a distance with his sling and beat the Philistine giant. But go take on more Philistines like my amazing son did. There's no way that David deserves the kingdom over Jonathan. Jonathan's way better. I'll take 1 Samuel 14 over 17 any day. So yeah, let's have him go take on a garrison, scrambling up the hillside and hand-to-hand combat. No, you go fight. Go fight the Lord's battles. Let's put it that way. And that way, he'll die at the Philistines' hands, and my hands will be free. You picture Pilate washing his hands of the blood of Jesus? Now, sadly, do you see a later David sending Uriah off to battle so that David doesn't have to slay him himself? There's going to be some parallels we'll see between this week and next that are heartbreaking. But at this moment, Saul is the evil one, and he's trying to trick David into wanting to marry his daughter and sending him off to his own death to do so. Well, as usual, Saul underestimates David and underestimates the power of God to preserve him. So he goes out and fights, and everything's great. Although, meanwhile, Saul has given that daughter to someone else. So he apparently never meant it anyway. It was just a ruse, and it didn't work. But I don't want him to actually marry into the family, so quick, got to marry Merab off to somebody else. Saul does have another daughter. Her name is Michal, or Michael as she is sometimes pronounced. And Saul promises her to David also, but under these conditions. Verse 21, I will give him her that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. So he hasn't changed tactics, he's only changed daughters. Meanwhile, David protests humbly. He says, my family's way too poor to even marry into the royal family. I have nothing to give by way of dowry. I don't have the 10 camels that Abraham's servant brought for Rebekah. I got nothing to give. I've got just a few poor sheep. That's nothing. And Saul is like, I know. But since this is a snare and a trap, I'm just using my daughter as bait, and this is what I'm asking for. Go bring back 100 foreskins from the Philistines. Now, there's some symbolism there. Remember, the uncircumcised Philistines is how Jonathan referred to them, how David referred to them. No covenant there. And they're not going to take it upon themselves willingly, so let's go force something. This is a little like Simeon and Levi and the town of Shechem that they trick into taking the covenant, right? But basically, in some ways, you could take this as Ammon and the servants of King Lamoni when he cuts off all these arms, and the servants pack them up in a bag and bring them and dump them at Lamoni's feet, because this is evidence. This is proof. And you can count the casualties that fell to the sword or the sling of Ammon, because here they are. Well, in this case, it's a more specific or a different body part. but it has some symbolism in itself as well. And there's no way that David's going to survive if he's trying to take on an army and fight 100 Philistines. Well, once again, Saul has underestimated the power of David and the power of God to be with David, and pretty soon David has gathered an army to go with him. They go out, fight in battles against the Philistines, and come back with a dowry of not 100, but 200 Philistine foreskins. Strange gift, but we'll move forward. Well, that kind of backfired on Saul. But verse 28, Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him, just like Jonathan did. Well, this is a family favorite to everyone but Saul, that is. Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Again, why do people fear righteousness? Why do they make goodness their enemy when there's no sense of enemyship in return? Why do that? Why do we sometimes want to drag down people we consider too perfect? My daughter said that she was bullied at a certain time of her life, and the complaint people said, the derision they threw in her face was that she was a Molly Mormon. And that speaks more of the people throwing that out than the person that's being targeted. What's wrong with trying to be good? What's wrong with trying to be faithful and righteous and pure? And yet that goes against, well, I was going to say it goes against everything Saul stands for. No, Saul used to stand for it, but he fell short of it, and that's why he feels that he's fallen short of David's standard. This is the crab making its way out of the pot, and everyone else drags it back down. Again, it's a matter of comparison. Pride is always that way. So turn to chapter 19, and we can add a few more tick marks or tally marks on the number of the counts of attempted murder against David, innocent David. Saul, in chapter 19, commands Jonathan, his son, to kill David. And wrong one to ask, because his soul is knit to David's. Fast friends. So Jonathan, instead of obeying father's command, warns David about it. And in fact promises him, I will be your eyes and ears within the royal palace. So whatever dad's up to, whatever scheme he's concocting, I'll give you the heads up. Jonathan even defends David to his father. Stands up to someone who obviously is kind of unhinged and is chucking javelins, and yet Jonathan would rather preserve his friendship and try to keep his father from committing such evil against him. So verse 4, Jonathan spake good of David unto Saul his father. Again, a dangerous thing to do. And said unto him, let not the king sin against his servant, against David, which is exactly what it would be, because he hath not sinned against thee. And because his works have been to thee ward very good. For he put his life in his hand and slew the Philistine, and the Lord wrought a great salvation for all Israel, including you, Dad. You should have been the one to do it. Thou sawest it and didst rejoice. Wherefore then wilt thou sin against innocent blood to slay David without a cause? Do we have the courage to stand up for people that are being misjudged or spoken ill about, especially in their absence? Do we have the courage to speak truth to power? Do we have the courage and love to try to reconcile people that there's anger in one direction, but not in the other, and it doesn't have to be in either direction? I love what Jonathan is doing here. In fact, he's trying to remind his father of all the good that David has done, including the good he's done to Saul. And actually, for a time, it works. In verse 6, Saul hearkened unto the voice of Jonathan, and Saul sware, as the Lord liveth, he shall not be slain. And Jonathan called David, and Jonathan showed him all those things, and Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in his presence as in times past. This is forgiveness, reconciliation, trust, friendship reforming, and Jonathan gets to be in the middle of it all. I love this. If I remember correctly, in American history, Jefferson and Adams were so tight in the Revolutionary period, trying to just develop a nation and gain freedom from Britain. And then there was this massive falling out that lasted for decades. But Benjamin Rush, if I remember correctly, who was a mutual friend, one of the unsung founding fathers, worked tirelessly to try to reconcile the two. He said, you two founding fathers are among the oldest men around that remember those days, and you don't have to be foes. You can be friends. You once were. And he would drop kind hints from one to the other, say things like, hey, Thomas, John was saying some really amazing things about things you did in the presidency. And Jefferson was like, wait, what? Adams would say something nice about me? No, there's no way. And then Rush is dropping hints on the other side, like, Thomas was so amazed with what you've been writing lately. And Adams is like, Jefferson? A nice thing to say about me? Well, near the end of their lives, those two friends took up a correspondence to each other that is worth its weight in gold. And their shared perspective on things they went through together is beautiful. It's amazing to see their reconciliation. Here, Jonathan is performing that role between Saul and David. And I hope we can do that when we see people that, it's like Joseph Smith and W.W. Phelps. Come, dear brother, now the war is past, and friends at first shall be friends again at last. I wish we could end the story there, but we can't. Unfortunately, another battle ensues, another victory for David, and that triggers Saul's jealousy and anger and pride all over again. He can hear echoes of tens of thousands instead of my mere thousands. And so once again, he throws a javelin at David, who then flees for his life. Was that our third direct time? But then you got to add the 2 times with the Philistines, and he's trying to use his daughters as snare. Again, I lose track, but there's a lot, okay? Saul then sends messengers to kill David, another direct approach. This time, Michael helps him escape, lets him down through a window. Sounds a little like Rahab helping the spies that came to scope out Jericho. Is that now who we see Saul as, a wicked king that the righteous people of Israel need help in escaping from? We've gotten that to that point. Yeah, Michal even puts a dummy in David's bed. I'm a husband and wife, and she just kind of sets this thing up and puts the stuff there, and he's just, and I wasn't feeling well. He's still there, and the servants of Saul come and realize what they've done, and they're angry, or report to Saul, who's very angry. David runs away. He ends up staying with Samuel, and Saul keeps sending messenger after messenger in search to apprehend him. But at one point, he sends a group, and they come, and once they get close to David and Samuel, the Spirit of God descends upon them, and they begin prophesying. Remember that happened to Saul when he was in the company of the prophets? Well, now it's happening to Saul's servants. And it doesn't say what they prophesied, but I'm guessing it was good things about David and bad things about Saul. And Saul catches wind of this. He's like, well, that didn't work. And he sends another group of servants, and they go through the same thing. And a third group, and finally, the 4th time, Saul is like, this is not working the way I planned. He goes to try to take down David himself. And as he approaches, even he feels the Spirit of the Lord descend upon him. And he prophesies just like everybody else. It's like, reminds me of the old stories of early Mormon missionaries in England when enemies of the church would tell the constable, this is a disruption of the peace, this is a nuisance, and so go after them. And they go, and they're like, well, I don't want to arrest him in the middle of a sermon. I'll just wait till they're done. And by the end, they're not arresting them. They're asking to be baptized at their hands. That seems to be the case of what's happening here. Well, chapter 19 then turns to 20, and here again you see the souls of Jonathan and David knit together. In verse 1, David's on the run. He comes back to Jonathan and he asks, what have I done? What is mine iniquity? What is my sin before thy father that he seeketh my life? Talk about, Lord, is it I? David's done nothing wrong. Jonathan's already reminded Saul of that. But David looks inward instead of outward and assumes, he gives Saul the benefit of the doubt, I must have done something to offend him. What could it possibly be? In fact, in verse 8, he says to Jonathan, if there be in me iniquity, slay me thyself. I'm not afraid of justice. I'm not afraid of facing the music if I've done something wrong. I'd rather face it from your hand. But I don't think I've done anything. Can you help me see my blind spot? Well, there aren't any. Jonathan tries to reassure David. But David honestly fears for his life, and for very good reason. So they renew their covenant of friendship, and they come up with a game plan. Here's their covenant. Verse 13, Jonathan says, the Lord be with thee as he hath been with my father. Jonathan's in such a rough place. He loves his dad. He loves his friend. He knows one is guilty and the other is innocent, and he's trying to reconcile the two, and it worked, but now it isn't. But he still remembers his father's good years when the Spirit of God was upon him. Now he sees it upon his friend and prays that it may remain there. In verse 17, for he loved him as he loved his own soul. There it is again, loving his neighbor as himself. Or 23, the Lord be between thee and me forever. Now, there's no better connection in terms of a friendship or a marriage or a relationship. If God is the only thing between you, then in some ways there's nothing between you, or nothing that will ever come between you that would separate you, because God is making you at one with him and at one with one another. You want a good relationship, make sure God is the connective tissue, and nothing can ever come between you. Well, that's the covenant. How about the plan? Jonathan's still going to be the eyes and ears of David in the palace. And he comes up with this idea, why don't you go out and hide in the woods? And I will try to get a sense of where my dad's at. Is he ready to reconcile, or is he still as angry and prone to throwing javelins as before? And I'll tell you what, as you're waiting out in the woods, once I find out from my father, I'll take a bow and arrow and I'll shoot arrows out into the field or the woods near where you might be. Careful, make sure you can dodge javelins. Hopefully you can dodge arrows in case I don't know where I'm shooting. I'll send a servant out around there, and I'll tell the servant, oh, the arrows are farther out. Keep going. And that's code for you, David, should keep going. Get out of here. It's unsafe. If on the other hand I say, oh, you went too far, servant. The arrows are on this side of you, so please come back home. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, David. Come back, and you'll find the arrows along the way. Sound good? Sure, sounds good. And so that's exactly what they do. Now David's away in hiding. Saul starts missing him, but not for good reasons. He asks Jonathan, so where's David? Haven't seen him in a while. And Jonathan tries to excuse him. So he had to go back to Bethlehem, offering sacrifice. That was kind of the same excuse that Samuel came up with to try to escape the angry Saul before. And how does Saul respond? Like, oh, okay, well, missed the guy, haven't heard the harp in a while. And life around here is a little calmer, a little more peaceful with him. No. Verse 30, Saul's anger was kindled. But notice its target. It was kindled against Jonathan. And he said unto him, thou son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Wait, what? Now you're blaming Jonathan's mother? Throwing your own wife under the bus? Whoa. He says, do not I know that thou hast chosen the son of Jesse to thine own confusion, and unto the confusion of thy mother's nakedness? Now that's a weird way to describe things. I think he's saying, don't you get that David's success will mean your failure? And even my failure as a parent, I think that's where he's getting at with thy mother's nakedness. It's like, why did we ever give birth to you if you're not going to grow up to be king? This is about the dynasty. This is about you taking my place. And as long as that punk David is alive, you'll never ascend to the throne. You see what he's getting at here? He's so jealous for himself that he's beginning to envy for Jonathan's sake. And Jonathan feels no envy for himself. No, I'd support David in the throne any day. I'll be his right-hand man. Saul goes on, as long as the son of Jesse liveth upon the ground, thou shalt not be established, nor thy kingdom. Wherefore now send and fetch him unto me, for he shall surely die. Well, it wasn't Jonathan's kingdom Saul was worried about. It was still his own. Still, he was right. You'll never be king. But like I said, Jonathan was okay with that. Verse 32, Jonathan answers Saul his father, and said unto him, wherefore shall he be slain? What hath he done? See, he's still thinking of David, not of himself. He's still defending a friend. Or maybe he's giving his father the benefit of the doubt and allowing him to explain himself. What do you see in him? What am I missing? I don't see any cause, but if you do, I'll allow you to explain. Well, Saul's got nothing to explain, and so all he's got is the javelin in his hand. And this time Saul cast the javelin at him, at Jonathan, to smite him. Now he's turned on his own son. Obviously not concerned that his son will actually inherit the kingdom like he just said. Because it's not just David's life that would get in the way of that. It's Jonathan's death that would get in the way of that too. Come on, Dad. Come on, Saul. But now Dad's intentions are crystal clear. Whereby Jonathan knew that it was determined of his father to slay David. So, what's Jonathan do? He arose from the table in fierce anger towards his father, and did eat no meat the second day of the month, for he was grieved for David, because his father had done him shame. I'm so amazed that Jonathan is able to hold two different emotions simultaneously. And to feel this anger towards his father, this righteous indignation, but at the same time hold nothing but sorrow for David. And trying to navigate that. Jonathan then acts according to the plan. He shoots the arrows, sends his servant after them, and says, they are way past you. Keep on going. And ultimately, when the servant returns, he says, well, thanks for your help. Go back home. I'm going to stay out here in the woods a while. Don't worry about me. And he does that so he can there say goodbye to his friend David. Verse 41, as soon as the lad was gone, David arose out of the place toward the south and fell on his face to the ground and bowed himself 3 times. And they kissed one another and wept one with another until David exceeded, just overcome with emotion. Jonathan said to David, go in peace, for as much as we have sworn, both of us in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord be between me and thee, and between my seed and thy seed forever. And he arose and departed, and Jonathan went into the city. This was as painful a departure as 2 friends could ever undergo. Their souls were knit, and now the knitting is being torn apart because of Saul. To get in the way of true friendships that exalted and supported and helped one another. Now, I do need to share that in modern times, there have been interpreters out there that have read passages like this to suggest that, oh, surely David and Jonathan must have been engaged in some kind of homosexual relationship. Words like that couldn't possibly describe platonic love. And I just want to point out that there's nothing in the text that requires that kind of interpretation. And in fact, there's so much that is in the text that would cast doubt upon that interpretation. First and foremost, all David's plural marriages, his heterosexual experiences, his lusting after Bathsheba next week outside of marriage. Be careful, I would simply say, in terms of biblical interpretation and understanding Scripture. Be careful that you don't read too much of what you're hoping to see into what is actually there. Okay? At least, especially not in areas that would be as controversial as something like that. Often in the history of biblical interpretation, what is being said about the Bible often says more about the person speaking than about the Scriptures being studied. So just keep that in mind. Now, let's pick up speed and keep moving forward. Chapter 21, David is now on the run. Okay, he knows the arrows flew, and so he's got to fly as well. And so he takes off, leaves Jonathan behind in tears himself. He comes to a town called Nob. And apparently the tabernacle had been moved there at some point from Shiloh. It's a priestly city that's not too far away, and David is on the lam, so to speak. He's trying to escape a friend that has become his enemy, Saul. And so he rushes in, and he and his men are hungry and tired, and again, just running for their lives. And so they go to the priest that's there at the tabernacle. His name is Ahimelech, and they beg for him. They ask him, do you have any bread that you can spare for us? And I mean, that's a good person to ask, right? They're kind of in charge of the Lord's storehouse, so to speak, and people are coming to give offerings and sacrifices, and so there's food for the priests, and is there enough to spare? And they've got nothing. which means either the priests are, sure enough, feasting upon themselves, or perhaps the people have lost confidence in priests and aren't offering much. Either one's a possibility based on what we saw with Eli's sons and Samuel's sons, right? Well, what ends up happening is Ahimelech does say to him, well, we do have the bread on the table of showbread, the bread of the presence, as it's called, the bread of faces. This is the presence of God. This is kind of the sacrament table, so to speak. But that's holy bread. That's been sanctified. Do you have anything to spare? Now, some have wondered, what's going on in this story? Is he just asking for food, or is he actually asking for allegiance from the ecclesiastical authority, since he has no more connections to the political authority? And if there's a separation of church and state, can I get the church on my side since the state is totally against me? Interesting things to think about. Is David trying to gather some allies on his side? Well, whatever the reason, hunger, I'm sure, is part of it, literally. And Ahimelech, it's interesting, he says, well, have your men done anything to become ritually impure? And David says, no, we've just been running for our lives. And he says, okay, then, why don't we take the bread from the table of showbread, and I'll give that to you. And that actually begs the question, where is the locus of holiness when it comes to something like the sacrament? My son, when he was a teacher, used to ask, what do you do with the leftover bread when we're putting away the trays after sacrament meeting? And for Latter-day Saints, it's simply a matter, these are tokens, these are symbols, these are meant to help us remember. It's still bread, okay? It's still water. And so if it needs to be, it can be eaten, it can be thrown away, it's not. The locus of holiness is in the ordinance itself, and the ordinance is over. Now, Catholics would not agree because of the doctrine of transubstantiation. And for them, no, this has become the body and blood of Jesus. And so there's actually some fascinating Catholic history and wrestling with questions like, St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, wrestled with the question of what would happen if a dog or a mouse happened to accidentally eat the wafer, the Eucharist. And he was wrestling with that because, well, what does that mean? And again, the question is, where is holiness centered? I think it's worth pondering as we partake of the sacrament, as we engage in works of holiness. Is it in the object? Is it in the officiator? Maybe a little closer. Is it in the recipient with their attitudes and where their heart happens to be? Is it in the act of participating in that sacrament or in that ordinance itself? I don't have clear answers on this. I am grateful, though, that Ahimelech must have been wrestling with this and deciding, no, this bread has served its holy purpose, and it can now serve a more human one. To me, there's an interesting contrary to prove when it comes to piety and pragmatism. And the piety would say, no, it's holy and must ever remain. And the pragmatic would say, I'm dying here. Do you have anything I can eat? And I think that's worth for us to wrestle with also and strive to strike a balance between piety and pragmatism. Well, David also asks, after he's had the bread, thank you for that, do you also happen to have any weapons? I know that's an odd thing to ask a Levite priest. But do you happen to have anything? And because we're unarmed, which tells you something. I've got my harp. It doesn't, not much protection. And so Ahimelech says, actually, yes, surprisingly. Here we have, you'll get a kick out of this, we've got the sword of Goliath. Remember that one? You're the one that first unsheathed it from Goliath and used it to cut off his head. But here we have it. He says in verse 9, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine, whom thou slewest in the valley of Elah, just in case you forgot in all of your humility. Behold, it is here wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If thou wilt take that, take it, for there is no other save that here. And David said, oh, well, there is none like that. Give it me. On the one hand, I'm amazed that David didn't keep it like a trophy. I think I'd have that thing hanging over my fireplace, like, see what I did. But for him, it was like, well, I didn't do really anything. Look what God did. In fact, maybe that's where we should put this sword in the house of God, because God deserves the credit for everything that's been done. Now, that's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, what if the people Because, again, David doesn't know that it's there. It comes as a shock to him. Maybe the people were thinking, we beat the Philistines. And this is our evidence. This is our trophy. So let's put it in the tabernacle where the other trophies belong. And my worry there is, if it's not a matter of giving God credit, if it's instead, are we just turning the tabernacle into a trophy case for memories of past triumphs? Have we turned it into a reliquary of the past instead of a house for the living God? And my worry about those kinds of things, again, I've talked about the three shelves. If shelf one is just so dusty and there's nothing going on in shelf two, because I don't think God will, I'll never have those experiences again. I do wonder, they wrapped it in a cloth. Is this like now a holy kind of thing? We're going to put it next to the ephod, the priestly robes or tunic. I do worry. In fact, it even makes me wonder about what's their attitude toward the bread on the table of showbread. Remember, it's also called the bread of the presence. Well, is there no presence anymore? Has God long since abandoned his so-called house because his people, his so-called people, have long since abandoned him? I'm wrestling with this. I think there's some interesting food for thought, no pun intended, with a story about bread. But interesting to think, is God's presence even here anymore? And am I just putting up souvenirs of past experiences I'm no longer worthy of having in my present? Where's the presence now? Well, verse 10, David arose. He fled that day for fear of Saul and went to Achish, the king of Gath. Now, if you know your details, this is a shocking verse. Where was Goliath from again? Goliath of Gath? When my son was little, my Jonathan turned to Jacob. When he was little, he couldn't make the TH sound. It was hilarious. He always thought there was an F that was supposed to come first. So anything that ended in TH would end in FTH. So Arthur, the little TV show he used to watch as a boy, he would call it Arthur. And when he learned the story of Goliath of Gath, we couldn't wait for him to tell the story because he talked about Goliath of Gath. And we just tried to keep a straight face and say, no, tell it again. Who was he? Where's he from? Goliath of Gath. Well, now, where's David going? He's going to the king of Gath. The hometown of the champion of the Philistines that David himself slew and spelled disaster to the Philistine army. Now, this should tell you something about how David feels in the presence of Saul. If he feels safer in the hometown of his old enemy. Well, he's got a worse enemy now, and it's Saul. So David goes there, and when he gets there, the king's servants look at him and like, this guy kind of looks familiar. Maybe a little older, but does he have a shepherd's bag, shepherd's staff? What's he carrying? If he's got the sword of Goliath, do they recognize that? I mean, again, it's shocking that David would put himself into harm's way like this. They feel like they recognize him, so they run back to the king and they say, I think this guy's David that beat our hometown hero. And David is so concerned about this, like, now I'm trapped between a rock and a hard place. I can't go back, but I can't stay here. What do I do? Well, genius, this is what he does, verse 13. He changed his behavior before them. He feigned himself mad in their hands and scrabbled on the doors of the gate and let his spittle fall down upon his beard. This is the Old Testament insanity plea. And he's not pleading it, he's pretending it. He's acting it out. And they're looking at this guy as he drools down his beard. So yeah, he's grown up a bit. He's no longer just the ruddy face. He's got some beard there, some stubble at least. And he's scratching at the door of the gate. And people are like, oh, there's no way this guy beat our champion. Maybe a lookalike, an older brother maybe, but there's no way. Now, you could end that story there and move on to chapter 22. But before we do, to me, there is another lesson here. David pretended to be less than what he was. Why? So he could fit in a place he wasn't meant to be. Now, it's not his fault he has to go there. He's just looking for some place of safety. And maybe that's like, well, the last place they'd ever expect me to go is Gath. The last place that Saul would ever look for me is there. And so maybe my most dangerous place is my safest place, ironically. But think about that in terms of Zion versus Babylon, for example. Israel versus Philistia, and which side of the mountain you're going to climb, right? Whose side are you on? And I worry, again, those that want to have kings like all of the other nations, those that want to fit in Philistine territory, too often are forced to act like someone they're not. And compared to having the wisdom of God, they have to feign mere madness. They have to hold to mere humanity and separate themselves from the higher light and truth that comes in the gospel of Jesus Christ. I do worry about those who lower themselves to that level just so they can fit in. Because chances are you've chosen a place that you were never meant to go to begin with. We can be better. We can be higher. We can be holier than that. Well, David is rising in holiness. Saul is lowering along those lines. And you see that clearly in chapter 22. After a time in Gath, Philistine territory, David then returns to Israel. And here he's hiding for his life in a cave. Verse 1, when his brethren and all his father's house heard it, they went down thither to him. And everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone that was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, and he became a captain over them. And there were with him about 400 men. This actually sounds a lot like Robin Hood to me, to be honest. His band of merry men. But who's coming? Those in distress, in debt, and in discontent. These are the marginalized and the vulnerable. These are the ones that have slipped through the social safety nets. These are the have-nots that are looking to have something better. And they see in David someone like themselves, he's a man of the people, but someone that is higher and can lift them higher as well. This actually, forget Robin Hood, this sounds like Jesus, who was constantly surrounded by those in distress and debt and discontented, looking for a better life. Many of those find their way into the church of Jesus Christ as well. Well, they're coming. David's still on the move, though. Can't stay in one spot for too long. And so he then goes to Moab. Philistines were one enemy, but I'm safer there. Moabites are another enemy, but safer there too. And when he gets there, he asks the king in verse 3, let my father and my mother, I pray thee, come forth and be with you, till I know what God will do for me. And the king lets him. He brought them before the king of Moab, and they dwelt with him all the while that David was in the hold. There you see David caring for those that perhaps he feels unable to care for himself directly, because if they're with me, then they're in danger with me. So again, he turns to an enemy, turns that enemy into a friend, and says, please, can you take care of my family? And so it goes. I also love the way he said that, at least until I know what God will do for me. I don't know all of God's plans. I know they're good. I trust him. But until I see a little more clearly what that's going to look like, I just want to take care of those that matter most to me. Saul, meanwhile, what's he up to? He's back home in Gibeah. And in verse 6, it says, having his spear in his hand, and all his servants were standing about him. He ends up scolding those same servants. He says in verse 7, hear now, ye Benjamites. So now we're appealing to tribalism. You're one of my tribe. I'm one of yours. Come on, we got to stick together in this. Will the son of Jesse give every one of you fields and vineyards and make you all captains of thousands and captains of hundreds? Sounds like he's bribing them to keep their allegiance. So then why this, that all of you have conspired against me? Now he's falsely accusing them of disloyalty. And there's none that showeth me that my son hath made a league with the son of Jesse. Now he's accusing his own son of treason. And there is none of you that is sorry for me. Now he's throwing himself his own pity party. Or showeth unto me that my son hath stirred up my servant against me to lie in wait as at this day. Wow, talk about total self-deception. In every direction, Saul, you're paranoid. You're turning every friend into an enemy. You're seeing treason in every place you look. Among your son? Among your servants? No, none of that has happened. Now, one of Saul's servants, however, does chime in. He pipes up. I mean, Saul's got his javelin in his hand, right? And it's his spear. And he's like, okay, I'm looking out for number one. You know, Saul, now that you mention it, I was in Nob a while back, and I heard that David had come through and that the priest, Ahimelech, had fed him and given him the sword of Goliath. The servant ends up saying, verse 10, that he, Ahimelech, inquired of the Lord for him and gave him victuals and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. You know, it sounds, if you have eyes to see, like he presided, provided, and protected. He's living the proclamation to the world and the family. Preside, he inquired of the Lord. Provide, he gave him food. Protect, I gave him a sword. In some ways, he gave him the sword of the Spirit and the word of God and the bread of life and the presence of God, and now, it sounds like quite the gift from Ahimelech. That's music to David's ears, but that's a sour song for Saul. And so he ends up calling for Ahimelech and all of his fellow priests, brings them, says, what have you done? He accuses them of treason. And verse 14, Ahimelech answered the king and said, whoa, who is so faithful among all thy servants as David, which is the king's son-in-law, and goeth at thy bidding, and is honorable in thine house? He's protesting and saying, wait, why would I ever assume that David is turning against you? Nobody thinks that, except you, king. No one's more faithful. He's your own son-in-law, for crying out loud. Most honorable guy I know. He'll do anything you ask. No one is more loyal. So by serving him, I thought I was serving you. Well, that's not how Saul takes it. In fact, Saul jumps to the opposite conclusion and says, no, you are in alliance with him. And since I want to kill him and you're on his side, I am here to kill you. In fact, I'll kill all the priests of Nob. And he turns to his servants that were scared of his spear a moment ago, and they say, fall upon them, slaughter them all. And even that is too much for even his servants. They refuse to do it, which again puts their own lives in jeopardy. He wants to kill anybody he sees, and it's anyone that's going against him. And now we're going to go against him? But no, I'm grateful for this moment among the servants. We will not slaughter these priests. Unfortunately, there is one servant, the same one that was there in Nob to overhear all this. He was not an Israelite himself, and so I don't care about Israel or the people of Israel or the God of Israel. I'm just working for the king of Israel because, I don't know, I hope to get something for myself out of this. And this one Edomite turns and slays them all. 85 of them. And then goes back to Nob and lights the town on fire and slays everyone and everything that is there. Men, women, children, babies, flocks, herds, complete annihilation. Because they did a good deed and had no idea that there would ever be negative consequences as a result. This is a horrifying story. One of Ahimelech's sons escapes. Only safe place for him, he knows. He runs to David. And he tells David everything that happened. And how does David respond? Verses 22 and 23. David says to Abiathar, that's that son, I knew it that day when Doeg the Edomite was there, that he would surely tell Saul, I have occasioned the death of all the persons of thy father's house. Abide thou with me, fear not, for he that seeketh my life seeketh thy life, but with me thou shalt be in safeguard. I will protect you like I protect myself. You're mine now, I'll be yours. But the way he said it earlier, it's my fault. I knew it. I knew it that day. Something was wrong. Why didn't I? You sense David blaming himself? This is a Lord, is it I moment for him yet again. And it's the madness of Saul. But here David takes it upon himself. I can't believe I put them in harm's way. I did not mean to. And I will do everything I can to make it up. At least to you, Abiathar. Come and be with us. Chapter 23 then, you see David continuing to fight with his enemies, but also fleeing from his friends. Such an irony. In verse 1, they told David, saying, "Behold, the Philistines fight against Keilah, and they rob the threshing floors." Therefore David inquired of the Lord, seeking divine direction, saying, "Shall I go and smite these Philistines?" And the Lord said unto David, "Go, smite the Philistines, save Keilah." Now, that should have been Saul's responsibility. The Philistines are coming. That's Israel's enemy. They're attacking Israelites, and Saul's the king of Israel still, at least ostensibly. Why aren't you the one doing it? And here's David struggling with his own safety, but now trying to do what Saul refuses to do himself. Do you sense the shift of authority and sense of responsibility from one to the other? The Spirit's already shifted. Now everything else is too. David is proactive. He feels the weight of responsibility. He still is caring for the vulnerable. In verse 3, though, David's men say unto him, "Behold, we be afraid here in Judah. How much more then if we come to Keilah against the armies of the Philistines?" It's like, we've got our own problems, David. We can't afford to take on somebody else's problems too. So every man for himself, and I'm sorry, but let the people of Keilah fight for themselves. We can't afford to do it. Now, David, meanwhile, inquires of the Lord yet again. Maybe they're right. Maybe they got a point. I'm going to double check here. Maybe I understood incorrectly the first time. But again, the Lord answered him and said, "Arise, go down to Keilah, for I will deliver the Philistines into thine hand." And David had plenty of experience with that. So he goes and defeats the Philistines, saves the people of the city. But he's afraid that Saul may have heard about the battle. And now I'm in this city that I'm trying to defend. Will Saul come and try to attack me here? Instead of attacking the enemy and saving the city, he's going to attack me and maybe destroy the city? Again, talk about role reversals. Everything's upside down. So again, he turns to the Lord for direction. He asks if Saul is going to come and attack the city, and God says yes. Then he asks an interesting follow-up question. "And will the people of Keilah deliver me into his hands? Will they hand me over so they stay safe?" And the Lord says, "Yep." Which again says something about the people of Keilah. Talk about no gratitude to your deliverer. Of course, that might say more about their fear of Saul. We know what he did to the people of Nob, and he'll do that to us as well. And so I'm sorry, David, just run. And he does. With the Lord's direction, he gathers his men and escapes before Saul can even come. David and his men then hide in the woods. And Jonathan, here he pops in again. He hears about it, and he comes in search of them. Verse 16, Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David into the wood and strengthened his hand in God. Talk about true celestial friendship. He said unto him, "Fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find thee, and thou shalt be king over Israel. I shall be next unto thee, and that also Saul my father knoweth." And they two made a covenant before the Lord. There's friendship, offering encouragement. I'm not going to abandon you in your time of need, even though that puts me in harm's way. If my dad ever found out about this, man. And again, no jealousy. Putting God between them at the center of their friendship, going to strengthen his friend in the Lord. I can only do so much, but I know all that God can do for you, and I know you're worthy of his companionship. He was always there between the two of us, making us one. The inhabitants of the area where David is hiding, though, they're in the woods, they start to be concerned, just like the people of Keilah had been. And so they go to Saul and they rat out David. They say, "He's hiding in our neck of the woods." And again, they probably feared, like the people of Keilah had, what had happened to the people of Nob. I mean, Saul's ready to just mow down anybody in his path. And so in verse 21, Saul says, "Blessed be ye of the Lord." Oh, so blasphemous coming out of his mouth, so hypocritical. But he says to them, "Ye have compassion on me," even though he never had compassion on anybody else. "Go, I pray you, prepare yet, and know and see his place where his haunt is, and who hath seen him there. For it is told me that he dealeth very subtly." Oh, look who's talking, Saul. But he says, "See therefore, take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hideth himself, and come ye again to me with the certainty, and I will go with you." You see, Saul was tired of wild goose chases and wanted to make sure. You make sure, know for sure that where he is, and then I'll come and attack. Well, David catches wind of that, and he keeps running through the rest of the chapter. until he has another opportunity in chapter 24 to show what he's really made of. You see, David again is hiding in a cave. And Saul, as always, is on the prowl, on the hunt for him. And lo and behold, he happens to enter the same cave that David is hiding in to rest. I don't know who gets more tired, the prey or the predator, but here's the predator coming into the cave of the prey, and the predator falls asleep. And the prey does have some weapons in his hand by now. Verse 4, the men of David say to him, very quietly, I'm sure, behold, the day of which the Lord said unto thee, behold, I will deliver thine enemy into thine hand. This is exactly what the Lord's been preparing us for. That thou mayest do to him as it shall seem good unto thee. This is our chance. Go, David, just like the Lord promised. And David arose and pulled out his sword. But what's he do? He cut off the skirt of Saul's robe privily. Now, we learned in the story of Ruth and Boaz that skirt can also mean wing. It's the edge, the extreme. And what's David just done? He just clipped Saul's wings. He just cut off the hem of his garment. Well, no virtue flowing out of him to help anybody, so no loss there. Then again, since the hem is supposed to remind Israel of God, maybe that's a sign too of just how much Saul has forgotten God. Will that be a reminder of his own forgetfulness? Perhaps. But then verse 5, it came to pass afterwards that David's heart smote him. He felt guilty here. Didn't even do anything. But his heart smote him because he had cut off Saul's skirt. And he said unto his men, the Lord forbid that I should do this thing unto my master, the Lord's anointed, to stretch forth mine hand against him, seeing he is the anointed of the Lord. Talk about a sensitive conscience. And I can picture his men going, what did you call him? Your master? You deserve the mastery over him any day. And the Lord's anointed? Are you kidding me? That ship sailed a long time ago. There's no oil on his head anymore, but there is on yours. You're the Lord's anointed, and he is trying to lay his hand upon the Lord's anointed. He should be punished as a result. But David wouldn't have anything to do with it. So no, not until God has made it clear that I'm to take command. In the meantime, Saul is still in charge. And I will not, I'll put it this way, I will honor the position, even if the person in that position no longer deserves to be honored. David is so good to the core. This is what happens next. Well, Saul eventually wakes up and leaves the cave. And once he's far enough off in the distance that David can feel safe about it, David pokes his head out of the cave too, and then comes out into the light of day and calls across that distance to Saul. This would have been a shocking moment as Saul wheels around and recognizing the sound of his voice. In verse 8, David says, my Lord the king. And when Saul looked behind him, David stooped with his face to the earth and bowed himself. How's that for humility before him? David says to Saul, wherefore hearest thou men's words, saying, behold, David seeketh thy hurt? You see there, he's giving Saul the benefit of the doubt. Who has turned you against me? Who has told you false reports saying that I'm after the throne, or I'm trying to usurp authority, or that I'm not your enemy? And whoever told you that I am is lying. Do not believe them. In verse 10, behold, this day thine eyes have seen how that the Lord hath delivered thee today into mine hand in the cave. Some bade me kill thee, but mine eye spared thee. And I said, I will not put forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed. It was not just a good reminder to his men. This perhaps was a good reminder to Saul. Don't you remember who you are and whose you are? Can you live back into that? Will you be the Lord's anointed and act like it? Please don't listen to those who have pit you against me, because I wouldn't listen to those that wanted to pit me against you. My own servants wanted me to attack you. I don't know if that's what's happening on your end, but let's both ignore those things and come to know each other. Quit listening to other people. Plant doubt in your mind. Come to know things for yourself. That's what David is encouraging. He then says in verse 11, "Moreover, my father, I did marry your daughter after all. See, yea, see the skirt of thy robe in my hand." Here it is, Exhibit A, of my ability to administer justice, but of my choice to administer mercy instead. "I cut off the skirt of thy robe, and killed thee not. Know thou and see that there is neither evil nor transgression in mine hand. I have not sinned against thee, yet thou huntest my soul to take it." Makes me wonder if we have evidence that we can provide to others that we hold no ill will to them. Do we have enough proof on our side to say, I'm trying to be a good neighbor, I'm trying to be a good friend? If people attack you or say negative things about you, is the evidence on their side or on yours? Then verse 12, "The Lord judge between me and thee, and the Lord avenge me of thee, but mine hand shall not be upon thee." You see David leaving things completely in the Lord's hands. "As saith the proverb of the ancients." So David knows the wisdom literature of his people. He's going to add some himself. He's quoting the ancients. "Wickedness proceedeth from the wicked, but mine hand shall not be upon thee." In other words, there may be problems out there. Wickedness is going to come, but I'm not going to be the source of it. Let that come from the wicked. He keeps going. "After whom is the king of Israel come out? After whom dost thou pursue?" And then talk about abject humility on his part. Who are you after? What are you hunting? You're after a dead dog, after a flea. I'm nothing. I'm not worth your worry. "The Lord therefore be judge, and judge between me and thee, and see and plead my cause, and deliver me out of thine hand." David is seeking God's help, not Saul's mercy. He's not asking Saul to be merciful. He's wondering why he's being so unjust. But he's trusting God more than his enemy. May God deliver me. May God judge me. May God plead my cause. May God judge you and avenge me if that's what is needed. I don't know if there's a better example in Scripture of someone trying to live what Doctrine and Covenants 64 tells us we should all be living. This is verses 10 and 11. "I, the Lord, will forgive whom I will forgive. But of you it is required to forgive all men, and ye ought to say in your hearts," that's more than just lip service, "Let God judge between me and thee, and reward thee according to thy deeds." That's exactly what David just said. The Lord judge between me and thee. The Lord avenge. To me, what's powerful about that is sometimes our failure to forgive is not because of our weakness. Now that happens too. But sometimes it's out of our strength. Our strength in terms of knowing justice is demanded. And we don't want that person to get away with it. But the irony there is, what, you think you can give better justice than God can? God isn't saying, forgive and I will too. He's saying, you've got to forgive because that gives me the opportunity to exercise the right judgment in terms of justice and mercy. And if they deserve justice, they'll get it from me. And if you deserve mercy, you'll get it from me as well. David understands it perfectly and trusts in that. We should too. And then Saul's response to this incredibly humble plea. Verse 16 through 21 is the whole thing, but each verse has something interesting. In 16, "Is this thy voice, my son, David?" And Saul lifted up his voice and wept. Was that enough to prick his conscience when the other person gives you no way to justify your anger? It really is me. All this self-deception just kind of fades away, and I'm the guilty one, not you. You have evidence on your side. I know that now. Or in 17, "Thou art more righteous than I, for thou hast rewarded me good, whereas I have rewarded thee evil." Amazing acknowledgement there. Or 19, "For if a man find his enemy, will he let him go well away? You didn't treat me like an enemy, even though I'd given you every reason to." In 20, "I know well that thou shalt surely be king." Huge admission there. And then 21, "Swear now therefore unto me by the Lord, that thou wilt not cut off my seed after me." and that thou wilt not destroy my name out of my father's house. Please don't take it out on my children. I'm deserving of God's punishment, I admit it. But please do not avenge all that I've done against you. Don't avenge that upon my posterity. Don't destroy my house. He's asking a lot of David. He's asking for forgiveness. Well, David's already offered it. But the next chapter, 1 Samuel 25, to me is one of the most profound chapters on forgiveness and reconciliation that you could ask for. It's incredible. Again, one that I'm sad that is getting skipped this week in Come Follow Me. This is worth our time. 1 Samuel 25. By the time you get here, Samuel has passed away. Samuel has. David, feeling more alone than ever, is back on the move. The story then shifts to a very wealthy man in Israel named Nabal. In verse 3, the name of the man was Nabal, and the name of his wife Abigail. And she was a woman of good understanding and of a beautiful countenance, so good inside and out. But the man was churlish and evil in his doings, and he was of the house of Caleb. Sad, that last note. Talk about the fruit falling far from the tree. Oh, Caleb, give me this mountain. I'll keep the covenant, keep the faith. Nabal was more, give me this mountain because I want to get rich on it. Nabal, in fact, this is one of those examples that there's no way that was his real name. This must have been added later to assign him his character type, because Nabal means fool. And I doubt any well-meaning mother would say, oh, look at this cute little fool. Let's name him that. Nabal, unfortunately, lived up to his name. Abigail did too, but that's fortunate. Abigail means cause of joy, or father's joy, or my father rejoices. Either way, there's a lot of joy in Abigail, and we'll see why in a moment. Now, Nabal is rich, like I said. And David, who had to beg for bread from the tabernacle, has all these men, and he's trying to flee for their lives, and they come to this incredible area of prosperity, and he sends messengers to Nabal asking for hospitality, which, if you remember the stories of Abraham and of Lot, is something that in the ancient Near East you never deny. I mean, I'm just asking for common courtesy. Will you provide for some people passing through? But Nabal doesn't want to have anything to do with that. It says that he treated them roughly and sent them away with nothing. And this is what he asked. Who's David? Who's the son of Jesse? In other words, why should I help a no-namer? Oh, careful. If you only knew who it was that was asking you. I mean, this is the poor wayfaring man of grief. This is, inasmuch as you've done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, right? You could have helped David, and David would have surely come back to help you. Instead, you're treating him horribly, then eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He gets to treat you horribly as well, and he is livid. David is furious over this mistreatment. So he gathers 400 of his men to attack Nabal as retribution. Now, meanwhile, Nabal's servants, who have heard about this, and they know what Nabal has said and how he's mistreated the servants of David. By the way, these servants of Nabal also knew how kind David was all along the way. David has an army of 400. If I was a servant in the fields, I'd be like, nervous. But David and his men did nothing. They didn't feel entitled, didn't attack to just provide for themselves. These were no spoils of war. They were seeking hospitality and being hospitable themselves. Okay, good neighbors. And so they rush back. These servants rush back, not to Nabal, who they know is a fool. Maybe they named him that behind his back. Instead, they rush back to Abigail because she is a woman of good understanding. She's one of my favorite people to talk about in Women in the Scriptures classes. She is as good as gold. They explained to her what happened, and in verse 18, Abigail made haste. No hesitation. This is a proactive woman of action, decisive. She took 200 loaves, 2 bottles of wine, 5 sheep ready dressed, 5 measures of parched corn, 100 clusters of raisins, 200 cakes of figs, laid them on asses, and booked it as quickly as she could to David. Now, that's a lot. You can see how extremely wealthy Nabal is and how extremely generous Abigail is. That's the irony. When one person has the purse strings and will never loosen them, and the other, can't we just give? She finally does. Meanwhile, David is saying to himself, kind of muttering under his breath in verse 21, "Surely in vain have I kept all that this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him. And he hath requited me evil for good." It's like, fat lot of good it did me to be a good neighbor. He was not a good neighbor to me. It actually makes me wonder if David is rethinking his earlier philosophy of always being kind and generous and turning the other cheek and giving people the benefit of the doubt. Because here it seems like no good deed is going unpunished. I should have just taken it and given food to my people. This guy had plenty and to spare, and he wouldn't spare it. So and I'm going to spare him. So picture him in this moment where, is vengeance the best way to go? Is just taking what you want? That's what Saul's been doing. It seems like everybody's been doing that but me. Am I an idiot here? Am I in the ball? Am I a fool? Because I'm not going the world's way and just looking out for number one. I do wonder, just in that brief statement, is he rethinking his philosophy on righteousness and altruism? Well, is his vengeance on Nabal a way of taking out his frustration on Saul? I do wonder that one too. I've been so kind to Saul, he keeps trying to kill me. Well, I'm done with that. And this guy's been a jerk. I'll eye for eye him. I'll tooth for tooth him. So David gets his men and decides, we are going to kill every male in Nabal's household. He's got some really strong language to describe that. But then, in the midst of his anger, Abigail arrives. This beautiful woman, this wise and understanding woman, comes with donkeys heavy laden with all the gifts that she has to offer, and she gives them to him. Not only that, she bows down before David. She makes no excuses for her husband. In fact, she says, yeah, his name's Nabal, and he lives up to his name. It's like, you think it's bad? You've only had to put up with him like one day. I got to live with the guy, okay? It's kind of a nightmare. And so I'm not trying to make excuses for him. I know he's guilty, but I'm asking for your mercy. I know he deserves justice, and you can feel completely justified in giving it to him, but I am begging you for mercy upon my husband that doesn't deserve it. This actually reminds me of another great quote from G.K. Chesterton. I love him. And he said this in a book called Orthodoxy. Some stupid people started the idea that because women obviously back up their own people through everything, namely their husbands, therefore women are blind and do not see anything. Well, they can hardly have known any women. The same women who are ready to defend their men through thick and thin are, in their personal association with the man, almost morbidly lucid about the thinness of his excuses or the thickness of his head. A man's friend likes him, but leaves him as he is. His wife loves him and is always trying to turn him into somebody else. Love is not blind. That's the last thing that it is. Love is bound. And the more it is bound, the less it is blind. You see, Abigail was bound to Nabal, not blind to his foolishness, but trying to plead his cause, even though she could not make a case for it. So, since she can't make a case, what's she going to do? What's she going to say? The next few verses, 24 to 31, are absolute gold. There is a book well worth reading. It's fairly old now. It's called The Peace Giver by James Farrell. In fact, Farrell is part of that Arbinger Institute that I mentioned earlier today that works in conflict resolution. The book, Bonds That Make Us Free, is more of the philosophy and intellect. It's the academics behind it all. But Peace Giver is Farrell's attempt to take all of that and bring it down to the level of real life. And so he writes a novel about a man and a wife that are having friction in their marriage and can't seem to get along or forgive one another. And this man keeps having dreams of his grandpa leading him through scripture stories that teach incredible principles. And one of my favorite parts of the whole book is when grandpa shows his grandson the story of Abigail. If you want to read the whole part of it there in Peacegiver, it's totally worth your time. But notice this, verse 24. Abigail falls at David's feet and says, "Upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be." You see what's happening here? When I read the Peacegiver, it gave me insight into the atonement that had never crossed my mind. Thank you, Brother Farrell. And there he points out, here's Abigail as the Christ figure, trying to heal broken relationships between David and Nabal. And Nabal deserves punishment, but she intercedes and says, instead of guilty Nabal, she says, guilty me. She says, upon me let this iniquity be. And the irony there is, but you're not guilty, Abigail. You're anything but. You are innocence personified. Ah, there's the Christ figure. And the Christ figure is saying, are you willing to let me take their sins upon myself? Because notice what happens next. Verse 25. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand. Now, what's she saying there? This is like how David had acted towards Saul. You wouldn't shed his blood, even though you knew he was guilty. You still saw him as the Lord's anointed. And that put you in a place of total innocence. Even though you would have been justified in what you did. You'd equally be justified in taking out your frustration on Nabal. But if you don't, then you have not shed blood. Now, the blood you would have shed was not innocent. But this gives you a chance to be even more innocent than ever. Because you're not, here's the irony, you're not sinning against the person who sinned. Well, would it even be sin on my part? Probably not. Again, you're justified. But to be so far away from guilt, several steps removed, that you can honestly say, there is no blood on my hands because no blood has been shed. And therefore, I never have to second guess my kindness, my compassion, my mercy. And again, that's part of what Christ does by taking someone else's sins upon us. It frees us from the burden of blame. It frees us from the hell of our own hatred and says, you don't have to feel that way about the other person. Because the sins aren't theirs anymore, they're mine. So if you want to get angry, take it out on me. Wait, but I can't. You haven't done anything. I know. And since I haven't done anything to you, my prayer is that you won't do anything to me or anything to them. And that frees you from the burden, from the pain. By forgiving, my atonement isn't just to forgive the sinner, it's to forgive, it's to help, it's to heal the sinned against. And David, you've been sinned against. But if I can intercede, I can draw the poison out of you. The poison of hatred, of vengeance, of anger, and you can be free of it all. So, verse 28, I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid. It's mine. I took it upon myself. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. And it doesn't have to be found in thee today either. Abigail is appealing to the better angels of David's nature. You've always been good. You can stay good today and have nothing to ever regret later in life. Like I said earlier, when I wondered, is David rethinking his philosophy? Abigail comes at just the right moment to say, no. That goodness, even when you get burned sometimes, that kindness when you keep turning bruised cheeks, it's worth it. So be forgiving for your sake, not just for the sake of the person who sinned against you. Then in verse 29, yet a man is risen to pursue thee, and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life with the Lord thy God. And the souls of thine enemies, them shall he sling out as out of the middle of a sling. I think David knows a thing or two about slings and how far they can send rocks flying away from them. That's how far God will send your enemies away from you. And God is the one who will do it. You don't have to do it yourself. And I just don't want there to be any hatred towards others that would end up, again, struggling in the second great commandment might make you struggle in the first. Weakening that bond. And I don't want to weaken that. I want you to be bound in the bundle of life with God. I don't know if there's a more poetic phrase to describe the atonement, the at-one-ment than that. Doesn't it make you just want to be bound up in the bundle of life with the way, the truth, and the life himself? And that's what Abigail is offering. Just let it go and stay with me. Verse 30, and it shall come to pass, when the Lord shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel. So she knew David's future as well. That this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offense of heart unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. Doesn't matter if it's justified or not. If you're innocent or guilty, either way, to stay that far away from any sense of regret, no grief, no offense, because you offered no offense against the person that offended you. Again, I am trying to protect you from blood, even when you wouldn't have been shedding it unrighteously. Still, maybe someday that loss of innocence would cause sorrow. And I want to save you from that. David seems to understand it. Because in verse 32, he says to Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, which sent thee this day to meet me. And blessed be thy advice, and blessed be thou, which hast kept me this day from coming to shed blood and from avenging myself with mine own hand. You're right. I get what you've done. And I'm so grateful for what you did, not just for your husband, but what you did for me. Thank you. Bless you. Bless your advice. Bless God for putting you in my path and for being what stood in my way from becoming vengeful and angry and losing my way. In verse 35, so David received of her hand that which she had brought him, and said unto her, go up in peace to thine house. See, I have hearkened to thy voice. I have accepted thy person. I have accepted you in place of your husband. And as a result, I have accepted the grace that God is offering them, the grace that he's offering me. I'm accepting the help he's providing for me to forgive. I'm accepting his at-one-ment. Abigail then goes home, relieved. She finds her husband, Nabal, feasting, completely oblivious to what just happened or what just might have happened. This guy is living up to his name as usual. He's feasting like a king. There were obviously plenty he could have spared to feed the true king of Israel. He's actually totally drunk, merry, all that he's going through. It's like, I just saved a fortune by not being hospitable to these guests. Sent them away and they went packing. Well, she waits until he's a little more sober. And the next day when he sobers up, she explains everything that happened and everything that might have happened if she had not interceded. And he, verse 37, his heart died within him. He became as a stone, which is about how hard his heart had always been. It came to pass about 10 days after, still hasn't recovered. The Lord smote Nabal that he died. So justice was indeed administered, but guess what? David didn't have to do the administering. David was able to keep his hands clean. What had he said to Saul? I'm going to let God judge between us. I'm going to let God avenge me if that's what needs to happen. What was the phrase in section 64? Let God judge between me and thee and reward thee according to thy deeds. That is exactly what just happened. Nabal deserved justice, and he got it from God. David deserved mercy, and he got it from God with the help of Abigail. And recognizing that help, and now recognizing that she was a widow, David turns and in verse 39 says, "Blessed be the Lord that hath pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and hath kept his servant from evil." It wasn't me that did any of it. "For the Lord hath returned the wickedness of Nabal upon his own head." And then he sent for Abigail. No doubt thanked her again, and then proposed. And they were married. Abigail was provided for, a true king instead of one who treated himself like one. A man of mercy rather than a man of selfishness, and a man of wisdom rather than a fool. By the way, yes, this is plural marriage, and it was authorized at the time. But one other detail, Saul, just like he had switched things out on David and had not allowed him to marry his first daughter, by then he had given his daughter Michal to someone else as well. Sounds like he's trying to cut all ties with David. Let me give you one last insight from chapter 25, again with the help of Brother Farrell from Peacegiver. Hopefully, again, to put in perspective what we've learned from this chapter about Abigail. He writes, "When people think of the atonement, they most often think about how the Savior filled in the gaps for their own sins, which he surely did. That is, we are all sinners, and someone had to bridge for each of us the otherwise impassable chasm between us and eternal life that we have created through sin. So normally we think of the atonement as something that Christ has done for us, for ourselves. But Abigail invites us to look at the atonement from a different angle, not from the perspective of how Christ has atoned for our own sins, but rather from the equally true perspective that he has atoned for the sins of others. And part of that atonement, Abigail suggests, is the idea that the Lord offers to those who have been harmed or potentially harmed by the sins of others the help and sustenance they need to be made whole. Those deprived of love can receive his love. The companionless can find a companion in him. Those with a cross to bear can find another who carries and makes it right. With their burdens lifted in this way, the sinned against are saved from the provocation to sin and are therefore redeemed from their own sins. Later he adds, Abigail's message was that forgiveness was for the one who was forgiving, not the one who was being forgiven. David needed to forgive so that, in the words of Abigail, he would continue to be found without evil, so that the Lord could make him a sure house. David might have felt justified in withholding this forgiveness from Nabal, however sinful such withholding might have been. But from Abigail? No. Her offering on behalf of another obliterated every justification David might otherwise have had. She freed him from the blind comfort of his grudges. Through this merciful act, she created for David the most forgiveness-friendly environment that could possibly be created. David was never more able to do what he needed most to do, forgive, or more precisely, repent of his failing to forgive, than when the request for forgiveness was made by one who had atoned in full for the sin David was raging against. It's hard to imagine a more beautiful story of atonement in the Old Testament than here. Here at the feet of Abigail, the joy of her father. 1 Samuel 26, we're back to David. And another chance for him to spare Saul's life. In fact, the chapter on Abigail is bookended by stories of David sparing Saul. But if you compared the two, the second, there is a maturity, there is a depth, more than in the first. And I think David has Abigail to thank for that. Saul, as usual, is still seeking David's life. He's got his army with him. Now, David and his servant sneak into Saul's camp. This is a commando raid, if ever there was one. And they do it quietly enough that it doesn't awaken a single soul, even those that are sleeping right next to Saul, mainly his main bodyguards and chief captains. Once they're there, the servant whispers, again, very quietly, to David, verse 8, God hath delivered thine enemy into thine hand this day. Now therefore let me smite him, I pray thee, with the spear, even to the earth at once, and I will not smite him the second time. I'll finish the job with one blow. It'll be Tiancum's first commando raid with the javelin that the king can't even wake up the troops to let them know what's happened. And I'll be the one that does it. So if you're trying to keep your hands clean, even though I think you're totally justified, well, I'd be totally justified, and then you're even a step removed. But no, David responds in verse 9, destroy him not, for who can stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As the Lord liveth, the Lord shall smite him, or his day shall come to die, or he shall descend into battle and perish. See what David's saying there at the end, what he's learned from his experience with Nabal and Abigail? No, I'm still not going to do it, just like I wasn't going to do it in the cave. But I trust God even more than ever. Nabal died, and I didn't do it. Sometime, if Saul deserves capital punishment for his crimes, then I will leave that in the hands of the Almighty Judge himself. And God will take care of it, because I know he's taking care of me. Once again, let God judge between me and thee and reward thee according to thy deeds. So, instead of slaying him and not cutting off the skirt of his, or the hem of his skirt, instead they take Saul's ever-present spear and they remove it and they sneak back out of enemy territory to friendly lines without waking a soul. And then again, from safe distance, David repeats what he did outside the cave. He yells across the intervening space and tells Saul what he's done. In fact, this time he even kind of questions the loyalty of his servants, saying to Abner, the captain of Saul's host, some bodyguard you turned out to be. We could have killed you. So in some ways, and we definitely could have killed the king, in some ways we're more trustworthy servants than you are. The king was safe in our hands, but if we had decided to attack, he was not safe in yours. That's interesting. David then again asks, what have I done wrong? Again he wonders, who is poisoning your mind, Saul? And again he says, I'm only a flea. Why would you hunt me? David then says of those that are against him in verse 19, cursed be they before the Lord, for they have driven me out this day from abiding in the inheritance of the Lord, saying, go, serve other gods. Now that's an interesting detail. I think what David is saying, why are you driving me away from Saul? Because in doing so, again, he's giving Saul the benefit of the doubt. Who's the one that's doing this? You've driven me out of Israel. That's the promised land. And I'm trying to keep God's promises. It's unfair that you're keeping me from the inheritance of the Lord. And then the other half, it's as if you're saying, go serve other gods. You forced me into Philistine territory, but I refuse to worship Dagon. You forced me into Edomite territory. I will not worship the gods of the Edomites. Please let me stay. And I think tragically sometimes the way we mistreat people, especially members of the church that we might have offended, are we forcing them out in some way from the inheritance of the Lord? Are we in a weird way suggesting they go serve other gods when that's not what they want? We can be kinder, we can be better than that. In verse 21, then said Saul, again, confession, back to his right mind, I have sinned. Return, my son David, for I will no more do thee harm. Really? Because my soul was precious in thine eyes this day. And then notice what he says, behold, I have played the fool and have erred exceedingly. Could we make it a little more obvious who the Nabal is in this story? And just as Abigail spared, or helped David spare her Nabal, I think her influence is helping David spare this Nabal. But again, continue with the foreshadowing. God took care of Nabal with justice. God will take care of Saul with justice as well. Hold on and we'll see it. David then allows one of Saul's servants to come back and retrieve Saul's spear, which is again shocking. I'll even return the weapon that you keep throwing at me. I disarmed you and now I will rearm you because I'm showing you a certain level of respect, of trust. I'm trying to honor your intent. despite all the times that you've shown that you're not trustworthy. He then says in verse 24, "Behold, as thy life was much set by this day in mine eyes, then please let my life be much set by in the eyes of the Lord, and let him deliver me out of all tribulation." Again, he wasn't asking Saul for mercy. Otherwise, he would have said, "I was merciful to you. Will you be merciful to me?" No. May God be merciful to me. I trust him far more than I trust you. And then, verse 25, Saul says to David, "Blessed be thou, my son David. Thou shalt both do great things and also shalt still prevail." Saul knew it. But could he fully accept it? We'll see. They go their separate ways. Chapter 27, David finds himself once again among Philistines. In verse 1, he says in his heart, "I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul." So yes, I gave him the benefit of the doubt, but I've got to protect myself. Yes, we need to forgive, but we also need to honor personal boundaries. And that's the contrary that's really hard to prove as well. David's trying. I'll leave Saul to himself, but I'm going to take myself away from his potential anger. And he says, "There is nothing better for me than I should speedily escape into that land of the Philistines." So just like before, safer with my enemies than with my former friends. "And Saul shall despair of me." He'll just give up, I hope, "to seek me any more in any coast of Israel, so shall I escape out of his hand. I'll protect myself from Saul, and I'll protect Saul from himself. Just like Abigail protected me from myself. I'll remove the temptation from Saul. I'll get out of his way." And so David goes back to Gath, same place he'd been back in chapter 21. This time he has 600 men with him, so I don't know if it's going to work to drool on your beard and pretend that you're insane. Then again, maybe I don't need to, since I have an army with me. Then again, maybe I don't need to because I can show the king of Gath I feel no ill will toward him, which is amazing. Verse 5, David says to the king, "If I have now found grace in thine eyes, let them give me a place in some town in the country, that I may dwell there. For why should thy servant dwell in the royal city with thee?" And the king agreed. Good idea. Stay close, but not too close, and I'll give you this country town to dwell in. And all your people can dwell there too. David ends up staying there for 16 months. And the whole time, great relationships with the king of Gath, the king of Goliath. He trusted David even when an Israelite king would not. Chapter 28 then, weird chapter, because we get to meet the Witch of Endor. By now the Philistines have gathered their armies. They want to go up against Israel, and the Philistine king asks David to accompany him. In fact, he says, "Will you be my bodyguard?" Talk about trustworthy. Saul sees them coming off in the distance and is scared to death. There's all my enemies, Philistines and David, of all people. Now, let's set the stage for that to happen. Verse 3, Samuel was dead, so now there's no true prophet for Saul to go to. And Saul had put away those that had familiar spirits and the wizards out of the land. And that's exactly as required by the law of Moses. No false gods, no false prophets, no false priests. These would have been soothsayers and the psychic hotline or the tarot card reader or the palm reader or whatever it might be, those kinds of people. And so maybe that happened in one of Saul's good moments. He wanted to live the law of Moses, and so he cleansed the kingdom of that kind of false prophecy. But now he's left with no true prophets and no false prophets. And the Spirit of God left him a long time ago. So what am I going to do against the Philistines and against David, and who do I even have to turn to? So verse 6, he tries God first. But when Saul inquired of the Lord answered him not. Neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. He's just unworthy of the Lord's direction. And I think he knew it. Verse 7, then said Saul unto his servants, okay, different option. Seek me a woman that hath a familiar spirit, that I may go to her and inquire of her. And his servant said to him, well, behold, there is a woman that hath a familiar spirit at Endor. And this is now affectionately known as the Witch of Endor. Now, if they knew about her, it makes me wonder, why hadn't they put an end to her false prophecy? Or was she kind of doing it on the sly? Or, again, how serious were they about rooting out evil from Israel? Well, I guess in Saul's case, I'm glad we didn't clean up the whole house, because It's like avoiding sin, but not sending it too far away. I want to be able to go back to it when I want to succumb the next time. Saul then dresses up, disguises himself, doesn't want to freak out this woman as I'm either that or I don't want to be outed. That's probably more likely for him. I don't want her to think that I'm lowering myself to her lowly level. I wouldn't fit with his pride. So he goes to her and says, will you conjure the spirit of the dead so I can have a conversation? And specifically, I want to talk to Samuel. He's gone. We used to be friends. Can you bring him back? So it's some kind of seance that he's asking her to perform. He believes she can do it, but here's the irony. I believe you can conjure the dead, but I don't believe you can see through my disguise and know who I am. There's a lot of illogic here. Anyway, verse 12, when the woman saw Samuel. Now this is where the story gets weird. Like, wait a minute, did she pull it off? Our seance is real? Can she really draw back the spirit of Samuel? We would say no. That can't be the case. Then what is it then? Well, is it someone she pictures? Because here it says she saw Samuel, but when she talks about it, she doesn't name him. Is this a figment of her own imagination? Is it something she's trying to conjure up in her mind and in the mind of Saul as well? Well, she says, she cries with a loud voice, first of all. The woman spake to Saul, saying, why hast thou deceived me? Thou art Saul. Now, this is a perceptive woman, evidently, at least to some degree. Is she seeing through to the disguise? Is she putting two and two together? Again, does this have to be miraculous? Or is it simply she's figuring out some things? Then again, even if God can talk to Balaam's donkey, or talk through Balaam's donkey, then I have no problem with him speaking here. But again, she's not conjuring up the spirit of Samuel. Saul reassures her. You're not under arrest, okay? It's fine. But he asks, what do you see? And this is what she says, verse 14. An old man cometh up, and he is covered with a mantle. That's it. She didn't say Samuel. Saul does. Saul perceived that it was Samuel, and he stooped with his face to the ground and bowed himself. So again, Saul here is assuming it must be Samuel. The woman never directly said it was. Then verse 15, Samuel, or whoever it was, said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up? And Saul answered, I'm sore distressed. The Philistines make war against me, and God is departed from me. Well, because you departed from him, duh. He answereth me no more. Well, because you're not worthy of the answers, neither by prophets nor by dreams. Therefore I have called thee, that thou mayest make known unto me what I shall do. It's sad to realize that people who can't connect with God will often turn to other things to connect with, in hopes of finding direction or meaning or purpose or relief or release. That's where alcoholism comes in. It's where drug addiction comes in. Often it's where trying to find anything out there that will get me out of my reality, and nothing else will work. My wife and son see it all the time at their addiction recovery center, and it's tragic. That's why my wife is trying to infuse that place with spirituality. That the real answer is not to turn to lesser things, but to turn back to God with full purpose of heart. That's repentance. So he can begin speaking to you again and begin giving you the guidance that you need. In verse 16, then said Samuel, quote unquote, whoever this is, wherefore then dost thou ask of me, seeing the Lord is departed from thee and has become thine enemy? You really think I can help you if God is unwilling to? And the Lord hath done to him as he spake by me, for the Lord hath rent the kingdom out of thine hand and given it to thy neighbor, even to David. Again, it makes me wonder, is this Samuel really speaking to Saul? Or is this Saul, again, thinking it's Samuel, because that's who I want to see, and I'm at the end of my rope, and this woman supposedly has these gifts, and she sees this old man, and he's stooped down, he's got a mantle, and it's got to be him. And so, what's his message to me? What would Samuel say to me? Oh, he's already said to me. And is Saul bringing back these memories? And last time I was with him, Samuel told me that God has rent the kingdom away and is going to go to someone else. And is this David? Is this what's going to happen? You better believe it. It's ironic that this deception on the part of the woman, or this self-deception on the part of Saul, is actually breaking through his earlier self-deception, and he's starting to see things more clearly. There's ironic. And verse 19, moreover, the Lord will also deliver Israel with thee into the hand of the Philistines. That's been on his mind. Do I fight against them? Again, he has no confidence in himself. He's not connected to God. So what's going to happen if I fight the Philistines? This could very well just be him talking to himself. I'm going to lose. God's going to deliver me into the hand of the Philistines. Keep going, though. And tomorrow shalt thou and thy sons be with me. The Lord also shall deliver the host of Israel into the hand of the Philistines. What has this dead figure just said? You're coming my way, Saul, and you're bringing your boys with you. Now, again, is this just Saul haunted by his own inner demons and afraid of worst case scenario because he knows God is nowhere near to being on his side? And we're going to lose, and I'm going to die, and my son's going to be lost. And talk about paranoia eating him up. Chapter 29, it starts to happen. Israel and the Philistines are at war, and the Philistines march into battle. David is accompanying them right alongside the king of Gath. They're in the back, in the rear. Now, the other Philistines leaders, they start to worry, and they think, wait. Saul's ahead of us, and David's behind us. This doesn't look good. Are we marching into harm's way? And has David just kind of embedded himself in the last 16 months and kind of, is this like spy and trying to ingratiate himself just so that at this point they can surround us and destroy our people? No. King of Gath, I don't care what you think about him, how you feel about him. He's got to go. And it's really interesting, the conversation that then ensues. You see, the king of Gath is like, no, he's been with me for 16 months and he's awesome. I completely I trust him with my life. That's why do you think he's my bodyguard? I mean, he was kinder than the bodyguards of Saul. Then I'm sure I can trust him to be my bodyguard. In verse 3, he says to his fellow Philistine princes, I have found no fault in him, since he fell unto me unto this day. Again, can we live in such a way that even our enemies have nothing negative to say about us? It's like Pilate saying, I find no guilt in this man. Jesus is good. I don't know what you have against him. Can we be that way? Still, the king of Gath relents. He understands where his fellow Philistines are coming from. And he says to David in verse 6 and 7, surely as the Lord liveth. Wow, he's invoking the God of Israel now as he gained faith in him in the meantime. As the Lord liveth, thou hast been upright. And thy going out and thy coming in with me in the host is good in my sight. For I have not found evil in thee since the day of thy coming unto me unto this day. Nevertheless, the Lord's favor thee not. Wherefore now return and go in peace, that thou displease not the lords of the Philistines. It really pains me to send you away, but I see where they're coming from, and just please know that my heart isn't in this. I wish you could stay. My wife and I actually had this experience with our neighbors in Tennessee that were just solid gold, best people you could imagine, Lutherans, deep conviction, faith in the Lord, wonderful, wonderful people. And when they gave birth to another child, we were so close to them, they asked, would you be the godparents of our child? Now, that's not something we do as Latter-day Saints, but it was something the Lutherans did, and we're like, we are so flattered and honored, and anything we can do to be a part of your family's life, we are honored to do it. And they were thrilled with that. Then they went to their pastor and said, we've got it all figured out and set up. And he's like, oh, who are the godparents going to be? Oh, our neighbors. And they're like, oh, wonderful. Are they members of the parish? And they're like, no. Oh, well, what Lutheran church do they go to? Well, actually, they're Latter-day Saints. Wait, what? Mormons? But man, they're the most Christ-like people we know. They're so great, and we just love them, and they love us. And the pastor was like, absolutely not. You cannot have LDS godparents for this child. And they very apologetically and kindly came back to us. And I think of them when I see the king of Gath, just, I'm sorry, David, it's not how I feel. It's about how my people feel. And David's okay with that, and we were okay with that, and all is well. Now, David reaffirms his trustworthiness. The king says, I know, I get it. Verse 9, I know that thou art good in my sight, as an angel of God. Notwithstanding, the princes of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to the battle. So you may not convince everyone, especially those who don't know you personally. But if you can convince those that truly know who you are, then they can work on other people. And I love that thought. That was my hope at Divinity School. I'm not going to convert these pastors in training, but if I can convince them that as a Latter-day Saint, I really am a Christian and that I love the Bible, then hopefully as time goes on, people that don't know Latter-day Saints, but know someone who does, just might change their perspective in a more positive way. Chapter 30, then, David leaves that battle. Saul's on his own to take on the Philistines. David, meanwhile, takes on the Amalekites, which had been the enemy that Saul hadn't completely ended, and Samuel had to take care of Agag himself. Now, that was just one Amalekite city, and there were others to fight. So David is marching to war alongside the Philistines, and as this is part of it, so this is happening during chapter 29, the Amalekites take advantage of the chance. And David has abandoned his little Philistine city where he's been living the last 16 months. And the Amalekites, these punk Amalekites, remember they were the ones that jumped out and attacked the Israelites right when they crossed the Red Sea. That's what ticked off Samuel, that's what ticked off God. And so here, they're doing it again. They are attacking the vulnerable, the undefended. And they're looking kind of lying in wait. And as soon as David and his men have left, they're like, now's our chance. And they sneak out and they burn their city down to the ground and take all the women and children captives. David's men find out about it. We can't go fight Philistines. They come home and there's no home to come home to. And their women and children have been taken enslaved by the Amalekites, and they are so angry. But unfortunately, they're not just angry at the Amalekites, they're angry at David. They start turning on him, thinking, if you hadn't gone on this fool's errand with the Philistines, we would have stayed here. Why can't you just make people your enemy? Why are you friends to everyone? Saul, the king of Gath, everywhere you go, why can't you just take it out on people? Or just let other people take it out on each other? Why do you have to be such a peacemaker? They talk about stoning David to death. And in verse 6, David was greatly distressed. But also, David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. It's the best thing to do when you're distressed. Best thing to do when you're afraid. That's what Jonathan had done for him when he came to visit him in the woods. Encouraged him in the Lord. Now David's doing that for himself. David then asks a priest that's there to bring him the ephod. Just a revelatory aid. You're kind of Urim and Thummim. Just anything to help me understand what God's will would be. Compare what David is doing here to what Saul did back in chapter 28 with the Witch of Endor. He went to false prophecy, and now David is seeking true prophecy through the ephod. Verse 8, David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And God answered him. So David is worthy of divine direction. Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. Talk about a promise. And filled with faith in that promise, David gathers 600 armed men and goes out in this raid to gather his people back. Now, eventually, it's, I guess, a long trip to get there, and by the time they get to this one river, this brook, 200 of his 600 men are absolutely exhausted and can't keep going. They are so faint that he leaves them there. As they're trying to regroup and things, he finds a slave that had escaped from the Amalekites. He was an Egyptian. And he asks them, do you know where the Amalekites are camping? And he promises, we will protect you from your former masters. You can be free with us. And so this former slave says, by all means, I'll show you exactly where the Amalekites are. And David and his army go. They fall upon the Amalekites and they destroy them all. The Amalekites are all celebrating their great victory, rejoicing in the spoils of war. And David comes in and reverses the fortunes of this army. He slays everybody except for 400 men that jumped on camels and booked it out of town. We don't hear any more about them. But then verse 18 and 19, David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away, just like God had promised him. David rescued his 2 wives, and there was nothing lacking to them, neither small nor great, neither sons nor daughters, neither spoil nor anything that they had taken to them. David recovered all. And the Son of David, Jesus Christ, would do the same. he doesn't lose anything. He can recover anything that is lost, including the people that matter most to us. Well, the 400 are coming back with all of their spoil, and they pass the 200 that have been resting and recovering beside the brook. And the 400 say, none of this spoil belongs to you. I mean, yes, take your wives and children back, but as far as flocks and herds and everything else, you weren't part of the battle. So you don't deserve any of the reward. But David won't stand for that. In verse 23, he says, "Ye shall not do so, my brethren, with that which the Lord hath given us." It wasn't us, it was God, "who hath preserved us and delivered the company that came against us into our hand. For who will hearken unto you in this matter? But as his part is that goeth down to the battle, so shall his part be that tarrieth by the stuff. They shall part alike." I love what David does there. Every one of us is important. Some were able to complete the mission. Others went as far as they possibly could. I'll accept both as full measure. Some were in the battle front, and others were, troop support back at home base. We're still all soldiers in the Lord's army. We're still all veterans. To me, there's something about treating everyone equally here. It reminds me of the parable of the laborers in the vineyard, that every single one gets their penny appointed, no matter how long or short they happened to serve, because their heart was there in the right place. And they would have served longer if they'd had the chance. They would have been hired earlier if I'd come earlier to hire them. They would have gone all the way through the battle if they had been able to do so. Elder Jeffrey R. Holland once said to missionaries, especially those that had come home early because of physical or mental health challenges, he said, "There's no asterisk next to the title RM after your name. You are a return missionary in every sense of the word. There's no second-class citizen here. There's no difference between a service mission and a proselyting mission. And the apostles have made that clear as well, the prophets have. There's no difference between, if your mission was cut short because of circumstances outside your control, including a global pandemic, if we've had one of those lately. You can be grateful for your service, and God will not treat you differently. They shall part alike. And that is a beautiful principle. Then, verse 26, when David came to Ziklag, that's the city that had been destroyed, he sent of the spoil unto the elders of Judah, even to his friends, saying, "Behold, a present for you of the spoil of the enemies of the Lord." Now David was of the tribe of Judah, and he still has friends there and extended family. And again, can you sense the shift of authority and power from the house of Saul, the Benjamite, to the house of David, of Judah? Loyalty and leadership is passing from one to the other. And then we get our final chapter, where it all comes crashing down on Saul, as he knew. Again, I'm not saying as Samuel prophesied, as whatever was going on in Saul's troubled mind, he saw it coming, and yet he marched headlong into his own destruction. The Philistines are still on their march, and David's not there. They come upon Saul and his armies, and in verse 2, the Philistines followed hard upon Saul and upon his sons. They know who they're really after. And the Philistines slew Jonathan. This incredibly valiant soul had joined his father, a loyal son, just as he'd been a loyal friend. Also, they slew Abinadab and Malchishua, all of Saul's sons. And the battle went sore against Saul. Of course it did. He was on his own. No divine help, no Ebenezer. And the archers hit him, and he was sore wounded of the archers. Saul is losing everything that matters. After all, the first thing he'd lost long ago was the Spirit of the Lord, any assistance he could have gotten from God. But now he's hit and he's mortally wounded. He knows it, but he can't handle, again, pride speaking. I can't allow the Philistines to take credit for this. I can't allow the Philistines to come and desecrate my body or actually end my life. And so He commands his armor bearer to kill him so the Philistines can't. And his armor bearer is horrified by the thought and says, I can't do it, I won't. And so instead, what does Saul do? He takes his sword and he falls upon it himself, thus ending his own life. And horrified by that, his armor bearer then follows suit and falls upon his own sword as well. The one that was supposed to protect him, I couldn't, and I certainly won't kill him, and he kills himself, and he kills himself too. Everything is falling apart. You sowed the wind, you reaped the whirlwind. The law of the harvest has come back to haunt you. So verse 6, Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor bearer, and all his men that same day together. With no leader at the head, the Israelites then flee. They abandon their cities, and the Philistines take over all kinds of territory, which next week we'll have to watch David try to regain. The Philistines also find Saul's body, and sure enough, they desecrate it. They cut off his head. They strip him of his armor. Again, symbolically, Saul had long since lost his head to pride, to envy. He'd long since been stripped of the armor of God and left himself fully exposed to the arrows of the adversary. They then publicize their victory over Saul. They place his armor in one of their pagan temples. They put his head in the temple of Dagon, their god. And they fasten his body to the wall of one of the cities. Cautionary tale. And then verse 11. When the inhabitants of Jabesh-Gilead heard of that which the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men arose, more valiant than Saul had been, but still honoring the position, even if the person was not worthy of it. They arose, they went all night and took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall of Bethshan. They put their own lives on the line to do this. And then they came to Jabesh and burnt them there, cremation. They took their bones and buried them under a tree at Jabesh and fasted 7 days. A proper burial within the land of promise. One last chance to pay respects to the Lord's anointed. I think David would be proud of them. In fact, next week we'll see that he was proud of them and rewarded them for that. You see, when D&C 64 says you ought to say within your hearts, let God take care of things, David had done that in his heart. No hard feelings, no rejoicing over his fallen enemy. Rather, sorrow over his fallen friend. Samuel would do the same, I'm sure. Samuel, if we rewind and end where we started, way back in chapter 8, the Samuel principle, I tried. I protested solemnly as best as I could. You ignored that. I tried to show you the manner of the king that you would have. And I even underestimated that. It ended up far worse. I gave you the best we could find, a king that was head and shoulders above, but that head, it didn't bow in humility. It was lifted up in pride. Those shoulders, they didn't bear the mantle of authority worthily. And that mantle was ripped from off him and placed upon someone better. Next week we will see more of what we've learned today as far as cautionary tales from kings of Israel. Going from the high to the low and crashing down in self-destruction because they couldn't hold on to their new heart. I am so grateful for God's patience with us and his mercy towards us, his forgiveness. He is the ultimate Abigail. But it's our own self-destruction that we bring upon ourselves when we turn away from him. I pray as we look back through this long history in 1 Samuel and as we look forward to what we'll see next week in 2 Samuel and 1 Kings, that we will do our very best to knit our hearts with righteous friends. Jonathans, they're out there all around us. And as we live into that second great commandment, that we will also live into the first and knit our hearts with God. I am grateful for the new hearts that he is giving us. It's now up to us to choose to retain them.